Why do we have human bones in our churches? Let's talk about it. This is the Bulwark. Please like and subscribe. So in Catholic churches, you will often find that we have the relics or bones of the saints either in the altar or somewhere else in the church. Even right here, I do actually have a piece of bone of St. Jerome, a Catholic saint who is responsible for translating the entire Bible into Latin. But why do I have this? What's the reasons for it? And how is this different from having somebody's cremains sitting on my mantle? Well, the reasons for this are found both in sacred scripture and in sacred tradition. So first, sacred scripture. In the second book of Kings, we find that the prophet Elisha has died. And in chapter 13, there was a different man who died, and as they were going off to bury him, some raiders were coming by, and so in a panic, they threw him into the tomb of Elisha. When the dead man's body touched his bones, the man was raised from the dead. So clearly here, God worked a miracle through the bones of Elisha. Similar things actually happen in the New Testament. So for example, the woman with the hemorrhage found in Luke chapter 8. Jesus is walking by, and she says to herself, "If only I touch his cloak, I shall be healed." And she touches the tassel of his cloak, and she is miraculously healed. And we even see these kinds of things happening in the lives of the apostles. So in Acts chapter 5, many miracles were happening through the hands of the apostles. Now we know it was the power of God that was doing this through the apostles rather than the apostles through like their own power. Only God can work a miracle. And yet we see that Peter is walking down the street and people were laying there sick so that his shadow might be cast over them and they would be cured. Likewise, in the life of St. Paul, we find this in Acts chapter 19, that cloths and aprons that were touched to the body of Paul were being brought to the sick, and God was working a miracle by those cloths being touched to them. So clearly, God works miracles through the bodies of his saints. So in the early church, they then got into the habit of often making pilgrimage to the tombs of saints, whether it be one of the apostles or a martyr. And there, people would often ask for miracles. And in many cases, miracles were granted through contact with the bones of a martyr. At the same time, we find that priests were starting the tradition of celebrating Mass over the tombs of saints. So this is where we got the veneration of relics from. On the one hand, we do see that God does work miracles through contact with the relics of saints. Then we also see that priests were celebrating Mass over their tombs. That's actually why we put the bones of saints in our altars. In fact, if you attend the traditional Latin Mass, when the priest kisses the altar at the beginning of Mass, he actually mutters a little prayer invoking the intercession of the saints whose relics are here present, and he kisses the altar. So these are the reasons as to why we have relics in our churches. Now, other churches don't necessarily have the tombs of saints within their church like others do, and so permission has been granted by the Pope for little pieces to be taken off of a saint's body and sent to a church so that it can be reposed on or in an altar. That is actually why I have this relic of St. Jerome specifically, is that it was meant to be placed upon the altar. And actually, that is where I usually have it, is on the altar within my chapel. So these are the reasons as to why we have human bones in our churches. This has been The Bulwark. Please like and subscribe.